Welcome to Layer of the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. For today's episode, I have a very special guest because we are going to be ranking the discography of the mighty Blue Oyster Cult. So let me introduce our special guest today. I have with me Josh Schwartz from Washington, D.C. Josh is the founder and guitarist for the heavy metal band A Sound of Thunder. A Sound of Thunder is getting ready to release a new album. So I'm going to say hello to Josh here, and I'm going to turn it over to him, and I'm going to let you tell us about his new album and a song that their band wrote that has a connection to Blue Oyster Cult. So hi, Josh. How are you?
Hey, how are you doing?
All right. So tell us about your new album.
I'm super excited to be here and talk about Blue Oyster Cult. But yeah, first, so we have a new A Sound of Thunder album coming out August 28th. It's called Parallel Eternity, and it is our 10th anniversary album. So in today's digital streaming world, there's really no point in doing just a best of. So what we've done is kind of create a new best of with all new alternate versions of some of our fan favorite tracks. So this is an orchestral album. We found an extremely talented composer named Brad Charles, who's just made this like the most epic version of the band anyone's ever heard. A full orchestration, so all the fan favorites, and then there's a brand new track called Explorer that's 13 and a half minutes long. So it's kind of our Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Oh, in fact, when we were mixing it and editing it, we were like, okay, it has to be at least 13:26, I think, is the original length of Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. So it's like we're gonna beat Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. So it's not quite Empire of the Clouds, but we beat Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm super happy with it, and yeah, so 10 years of the band already.
Fantastic. Now tell me, you were telling me earlier before we started recording about there's a connection between A Sound of Thunder song and Blue Oyster Cult. Tell everybody about that.
So I'm the huge Blue Oyster Cult fan in the band, and they're a huge influence on me as far as lyrics and tones and guitar playing. Buck Dharma is one of my favorite guitarists, and I play a Steinberger to this day because of Buck. I just started on him. It was pure hero worship. I saw him using one, and I thought it was cool, so I got one and stuck with it ever since. But a couple years ago, I got a wild hair to write a sequel to Imaginos. I figured the band was never going to touch it again, so why not take a crack at it? And I actually got in touch with Albert Bouchard, and he gave me some pointers on where the story was going to go. And I just missed getting in touch with Sandy Pearlman about it. Obviously, you know, this creator of the story of Imaginos. Yeah. He had just had a stroke. I missed him by 2 weeks, and he died shortly after that.
Yeah.
But Albert is super, super cool, super down to earth. Some people might not know he's a school teacher now.
Yeah,
he still plays in bands, but he's just a super cool. He runs marathons. He's like one of my heroes.
Yeah.
So he gave me some pointers on where the story might go. It was the first time I ever wrote all the lyrics for A Sound of Thunder song, and so it's a 9.5 epic track. We got Tony Carey from Rainbow to play keyboard on it.
Wow.
And,
how cool is that?
He was cool too. And yeah, so it's on our album It Was Metal, and the song is called Obsidian and Gold, which is a reference to the mirror from Imaginos.
That is
and
awesome.
Yeah, it's streaming and up on YouTube, or if you want to grab a CD or vinyl, you can get them from us. But that's our big homage to B.O.C, my favorite.
That is awesome. That is awesome. And I'm going to be leaving a link in the description for everybody that'll take you to A Sound of Thunder, so you can check out their music. They're a fantastic, classic-sounding heavy metal band. So when about a couple years ago, I was looking around on YouTube for some reviews of the Blue Oyster Cult box set, and as I'm flipping through, I see this guy, and now I have to explain to everybody, I live in Tampa, Florida now, but I used to have a band in Pennsylvania, and my band had played a show with Josh's band, A Sound of Thunder, so I knew him from that, but I've been in Tampa now for almost 7 years. And a few years ago, I'm watching a video of people reviewing the box set, and I'm like, why does this guy look familiar? And I'm like, wait, that's Josh from A Sound of Thunder. And so when I started this YouTube channel, I'm a big Blue Oyster Cult fan. I said, I've got to do, at least, I'm going to be doing a bunch of Blue Oyster Cult things. And I knew the first guy that I had to reach out to was you to do this. So So here we are ready to go. We have a few minor rules in place here. We're not doing any live albums. We didn't count the Cult Classics album, which is remakes of older material. And we didn't include Bad Channels, which is a soundtrack that they had 4 proper songs on, I think, really? 2, that's right. And then there's
if we can count it, that's my number 1.
Yeah.
Because it's only got A Demon's Kiss and The Horsemen Arrive, and they're both bangers.
Right, they're both excellent songs.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the soundtrack has some other bands, plus Blue Oyster Cult just doing like some incidental music. But we didn't include that on our list. So we are going to start at number 13. Josh wanted me to start, so I'm gonna jump right in here and do it. Now, the bottom part of my list was tricky for me to come up with this, and I shuffled these guys around, but I went with number 13 for me, Heaven Forbid.
You wrong, though. I'm out.
And I'll tell you what happened to me. I actually had this in my next album ranked a little bit higher. And it's not, I don't think there's any bad Blue Oyster Cult album. But for me, this record doesn't sound enough like Blue Oyster Cult for me to totally get into it. I think there's a lot of great guitar playing from Buck Dharma on this record, who, just like Josh, I love Buck, and I think he's a highly underrated guitar player. And I think there's a lot of great playing on this record and the record that came after it. But, and his lead playing and his guitar sound is great on this. But for me, there just isn't enough there. I like See You in Black, I think is good. Harvest Moon, I think is a good one, and that's one that I know that they play, do still play in their set lists. Power Underneath Despair is probably my favorite cut on it. I kind of like there's this dun 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 thing in the guitar that sounds, just because it sounds the most like classic B.O.C. to me. Eric, I think, sounds really good on.
That song has the first 7/8 time signature I ever heard in my life. Remember when that song came? That song was in advance before Heaven Forbid came out. It was on the Summer Days tour soundtrack, and I listened to the hell out of it. And there was a part I couldn't figure out why it sounded weird to me. And now, as a musician later, I'm like, oh, it's a 7. My teenage brain had no idea what to do with the 7/8.
Yeah, and I don't like Still Burnin'. It just feels like it's trying to fill space. They're looking back to the past, and it just doesn't work for me. In the live, I mean, I love that song, but again, it just feels like they just ran out of ideas in the last 2 songs on the disc. They're just sort of filling space for. So for me, it's an okay album. It's a good album. It's not a great album for me. So that's my number 13. So what do you have at number 13?
All right, this might be a surprise to you. The Revolution by Night.
I might have to get up and
leave. Did I offend you? Well, I legitimately like every Blue Oyster Cult album. So the pros for me on this album are Shooting Shark is one of the all-time Buck classics, which is still in the set list to this day.
Yeah.
So you gotta give it credit for that. There's a ton of great Eric Bloom vocals on this record, great performances. And I singled out Veins. I thought Veins is like a really interesting song on this album, different from anything else they've ever done. The main reason this is my least favorite Blue Oyster Cult album is because of the goddamn drums.
Yeah. And
electronic drums, and once you hear the sample, especially on the snare, it just is like, it's like a spike in my brain, and I can't ignore it, and it just overrides everything. So most of this album was electronic drums, but it's also it's the first album without Albert, and I don't think Rick Downey's playing is exciting, even separate from the tones. I don't think his drumming is exciting as Albert's. And then even the mix, like I love, like Feel the Thunder and Shadow of California are like big epic songs, and they should be great, but to me they have no power. Like the guitars don't hit, like nothing really hits me in the gut with the sound. So for me it's kind of a bunch of different factors, but it's such a letdown after Martin Birch sound wise. go from Fire of Unknown Origin, which is pretty high on my list. I'm guessing it is on your too. So back-to-back, Fire of Unknown Origin to Revolution by Night. What a letdown sound-wise, and then creatively too for me. And suddenly they're bringing in outside songwriters, which is a theme that continues. And I don't know, you got Buck in the band. He wrote Burnin' For You on the previous album, one of their biggest hits ever, their second biggest hit. And it just seems like why bring in outside songwriters?
Well, you're going to see as I go down my list, I'm a really big Albert Bouchard fan. And I think when Albert left, some people may not realize this out there. Albert was the drummer in the band, but Albert wrote a lot. And I think that he had just his presence in the band with the direction of the songwriting, because to me, as soon as he left the band, my bottom five are Albert's not on them. So, and some of my favorite Blue Oyster Cult songs are.
I was totally gonna get to the same thing. I'm surprised we got here this quick, but yeah, I don't feel like even Buck, Eric, and Joe, when Joe was in the band, like none of those guys have enough ideas on their own to fill up a great album. Like to me, a Blue Oyster Cult is the greatest American rock band ever, but only when you got all four of those guys together.
Yeah, the early band was really a sum of the parts, all the guys together.
Yeah, and I do love Heaven Forbid a lot more than you, but I totally get it that you only have the two dominant personalities out of the four. And not to disrespect Alan Lanier, but his writing wasn't like a big part of the picture. Yeah, you're right. It just, without the Bouchard influence, it's not really like the Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, and on Heaven Forbid, this is another thing that I didn't bring up. There's 6 Buck vocals on Heaven Forbid and 4 from Eric. And although I like Buck's voice a lot, I like when it's spread out more evenly, and I kind of like it when Eric is more of the guy that handles a little bit more than everybody else. And I think in the classic era of the band, where it was maybe Eric would have 4 or 5, Buck would have 1 or 2, Albert would have 1, Joe would have 1, where it was just spread out a little bit more. So these later albums where it sort of gets flipped around, like on Heaven Forbid, where there's 6 Buck vocals, there's just not enough variety to me. And I don't know if that's because Eric's voice is deteriorated over the years, or it just feels to me like Buck has taken more control of the band.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So that leads into my number 12 pick, Curse of the Hidden Mirror. All right, and it's pretty much the same. If you heard me talking about Heaven Forbid, it's pretty much the same feeling. Doesn't feel like a B.O.C. record, although Eric, I'm pretty sure, sings more on this than he did on Heaven Forbid. But it's the same complaint. And you mentioned Alan Lanier. When I first went and revisited the Heaven Forbid and Curse of the Hidden Mirror, and there was a moment there I was like,
is he here?
There's keyboards on this, right? And I actually went back and looked in the liner notes, because the keyboards are almost just not there, barely there at all on these records. And not that Alan was a John Lord style keyboard player, but in the early B.O.C. stuff, there's always those sort of textures and keyboard things coming in and out. And I really miss that on these 2 records, Heaven Forbid and Curse of the Hidden Mirror. With that said, though, my favorite song on the record is probably The Old God's Return.
Yes.
Because, it really reminds me of classic B.O.C., especially when Eric's doing that, forever!
Yeah, the echo on it is great.
Yeah, exactly.
And the lyric is great, too. I love it.
Yeah. Out of the Darkness has a nice Buck lead in it. Reminds me a little bit of Last Days of May, a little bit, the way his lead in that. It's got a good catchy chorus. I like Eye of the Hurricane because it has that keyboard lick in it. And it's like, man, why didn't they do more of that? Dance on Stilts is cool. Showtime is cool. But again, it's not a terrible album, but it's just doesn't sound enough like B.O.C. for me. So that's my number 12.
Okay. All right, now I might drive you out of the room again. And my number 12
Oh, this is shocking. I
is
thought because you did an Imaginos thing, I thought that it was going to appear really high on your list.
Okay, so here's the deal. I'm ranking this very low as a Blue Oyster Cult album because, in my opinion, this is not a Blue Oyster Cult album. If we were just comparing them, just music to music, this would be way higher up on the list. In some ways, this is the best Blue Oyster Cult album to me because it's so consistent. And to me, this is like the most epic Blue Oyster Cult has ever sounded because there's so many instruments going on. It's like the Meatloaf album of Blue Oyster Cult albums. But here's my problem with this one. All right, what do you think? What's the most epic track on the album, in your opinion? Usually people pick the same one.
I don't know.
Okay.
I have probably issues with this whole album, so.
Okay. I had to write it down because the title's so goddamn long.
The Siege, and yeah, that's what I was going to say. The Siege and Investiture of Baron von Frankenstein's Castle at Lyceria.
Yeah, which is the longest, most epic song on the album and the one that the fans mention a lot. The vocals are by a guest vocalist.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure, I listened to it again today, I'm pretty sure there's no Buck guitar solos on this entire album. So you got an album that was done by Albert and Sandy separately years earlier. And then they brought in Buck and Eric to do some vocals that didn't even get Buck to do the guitar solos. It's covered in guest guitar solos, which are all good. But it's not, to me, it's not Blue Oyster Cult. I've always liked I'm the One You Warned Me Of. I love that track. And now in later years, now Les Invisibles is my favorite. I'll get that 777. Yeah. It's stuck in my head. It's a great song. I think all the songs are pretty good, honestly, but to me, I gotta rank this album lower because it's not really a Blue Oyster Cult album.
Yeah. Well, that leads right into my number 11. And here I thought you were going to be really mad at me for ranking this so low. For those that don't know out there, Imaginos, you heard us mention Albert Bouchard earlier. Albert leaves the band 8 years later. He tries to do this as a solo album. Sandy Pearlman, their original manager, who was also very instrumental in the direction of the band, wrote lyrics for them and concepts. They tied together this concept of Imaginos. And you would think if there was a band that a concept album would work for, B.O.C. would be that band, right?
Did they tie it together though?
Right. That's what I mean. I have a bunch of issues with this album. I don't like the mix on it. I think the mix is very dated. The drums sound terrible on it. Everything it's just not a good mix.
It's kind of muddy.
Yeah, there's too many guest musicians. You mentioned that earlier about Buck not really having any solos. For those that don't know, it's got Joe Satriani playing solos, or Robbie Krieger from The Doors.
Aldo Nova,
right. So there's all these guest musicians on it, and it probably took them too long. The whole concept just didn't tie together. I don't like the fact that they redid Astronomy. Yeah, I mean, the original is so great. One of my favorite songs. It just doesn't work on here for me. They redo the lyrics for Subhuman, insert it into another song. It just doesn't work for me. But that being said, there are some songs I like. In the Presence of Another World, it's kind of a cool, dark ballad. I like the Siege and Investiture of Baron von Frankenstein, but like you mentioned, it doesn't even has a guest vocalist on it.
It's a great song.
Yeah, it's just it doesn't sound. Is it really even a B.O.C. song if you don't even have any of them singing on it? And that's another thing. Even when Eric and Buck sing on this, it just sounds to me like it was phoned in. It was something that the band was sort of. Nobody really wanted to do this. I know that there were legal things involved with
I think it's dead on. I heard that they just finished it as a favor to Sandy Pearlman, basically.
Yeah.
Because they were the album was incredibly expensive, apparently. They were in debt like $2 million or something to the label, and they just had to get it out. And they knew they wouldn't be able to sell it if they called it Albert Bouchard.
Yeah.
They're like, can you guys please let us call it Blue Oyster Cult?
Yeah. And this almost landed for me in my number 13 spot. But as I was listening to Heaven Forbid and Curse of the Hidden Mirror, I listened to them a bunch of times. And when I was done listening to them and I went back to the regular B.O.C. catalog, the other B.O.C. catalog, I felt almost like this, like, okay. It felt like a chore for me to listen to Heaven Forbid and Curse of the Hidden Mirror. So even though Imaginos, it has at least some elements that make me think of Blue Oyster Cult a little bit more than Heaven Forbid and Curse of the Hidden Mirror did. So that's how Imaginos lands at number 11 for me.
Number 11. All right. Here's my number 11. The much maligned Club Ninja.
Yeah.
But now we're into like, I don't even have a problem with this record. Like my first two were the only two where I had any like serious complaints. I actually love this record. I just love it a little less than the other ones. So Club Ninja, I heard this album first on vinyl. It was out of print on CD forever in the 90s and 2000s. And it was the last Blue Oyster Cult album I ever heard. I heard it sucked. I mean, it's like pretty universally considered one of the worst Blue Oyster Cult albums. And I heard it and I loved it. So to me, in my opinion, there's great vocals from Eric and Buck on this record. I love the mix. It's not quite as punchy as like a modern mix, but in general, I think it's well balanced. And it's a great headphone album. I listened to it on headphones this week, and there's some really cool keyboard textures. They are very 80s, but I like them. And there's this cool interplay they've got going on more than any other Blue Oyster Cult album I've ever heard, where they'll have the high gain crunchy guitars, and they'll have some complementing like clean tone guitar parts popping around in the mix. So to me, it's good. There's a ton of good ear candy on this record. And I think it's a high energy Blue Oyster Cult album. You know, they're not a band that's known for a lot of up-tempo songs, especially later in their career. But to me, this is a good like high energy one. And also the harmony vocals are awesome. Like Blue Oyster Cult's kind of known for the harmony vocals, but to me on this album, it's just another level. Like they've got the harmony vocals dialed in. I don't like that there's so many outside songwriters on this one. And this just feels like a band that totally lost confidence. The titles like Make Rock Not War and Beat 'Em Up, totally cheesy. I actually like those songs. Like they're classic like Bob Halligan songs, you know. I think maybe if one of them had showed up on Defenders of the Faith instead of Some Heads Are Gonna Roll, like nobody would have mentioned it. But because it's Blue Oyster Cult and then there's this cheesy cover and it's not one of their best albums, like they catch some flack for it. But I actually like those songs. I think they're good Eric vocals, but just the titles are cheesy. This freaking album cover, horrible. To me, it's horrible. You know, it looks like a cheap comic book cover. And even the title, like Club Ninja, like 1986, it just sounds like a focus group toy line. Like what do kids like? Ninjas are in, right?
Yeah.
Let's call it Club Ninja. So anyway, but there's some fan favorites. Perfect Water, I think, is one of the best songs Buck's ever written. And people mention Shadow Warriors and Madness to the Method a lot. I think the second half of this record, the last three songs are a super strong ending to the record. And the one nobody ever talks about is Spy in the House of the Night. And that's one of my favorite tracks. So that's it for me on Club Ninja.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to echo you again. My number 10, Club Ninja. Nice. And you said a lot of the same things that I feel about this record. I think it does get a bad rap pretty much from here on out now with my countdown. These are all albums that I really like. I think this album does get a bad rap. It usually shows up at the bottom of people's lists. Maybe I like the production on it. I think there's, like you said, there's a lot of headphone candy kind of stuff going on, layered stuff. And that's what I hate to keep coming back to Heaven Forbid and Curse of the Hidden Mirrors, but that's what I missed on those albums was what you get here on Club Ninja, which is you can put some headphones on and you're hearing interesting multiple guitar stuff and keyboard stuff in and out. So I think this album, like you said, it gets a bad rap. It's got some really great Buck guitar playing on it, and especially like you mentioned, the last songs, Shadow Warrior has a really cool riff, and it's got a great outro solo. I love Madness to the Method. I love the lyrics in it. I even wrote one of them down here. A rock through a window never comes with a kiss.
That's a great line.
You know, right. And, you know, Blue Oyster Cult was a band that was always known for really intelligent lyrics. And okay, let's be honest, they had a lot of outside lyric writers through their years, but they were always known for being a very thinking man's metal, even though I don't really consider Blue Oyster Cult to be metal. They're a thinking man's hard rock, heavy metal band. So for them to have songs called Make Rock, Not War and Beat 'em Up is just like,
yeah,
it's just below them, you know. And on top of it, those are two of the songs that had outside writers on them. So it's like, really? You brought outside writers in for that? But like you said, I think maybe it was just sort of a confidence thing at that
I
time.
really think when they lost Albert and they lost Sandy, that they just had a crisis of confidence.
Yeah.
You know, it was Mirrors was kind of the same deal. You know, they have this kind of history of swinging back and forth between kind of just doing their own thing, doing the meat and potatoes stuff that they're really good at and being weird. And then they'll be like, oh God, we got to make some money or we need a hit. And then they try too hard.
Pulled in, right? A restrained, popish. I like White Flags. Dancing in the Ruins. Dancing in the Ruins is another one of my favorites on here. Perfect Water, like you mentioned, I think is fantastic. So a maligned album that I think deserves more credit than it gets. So that was my number 10. So you are on number 10.
Number 10. All right.
Okay.
Curse of the Hidden Mirror. So a little setup. Heaven Forbid came out when I was 17 years old. That was the first Blue Oyster Cult album that came out after I was a fan. So that's stuff that hits when you're at that age. So this one would have come out when I was like 21. So I think the stuff that hits at that age, you grasp onto a lot more. So those albums hit at a good time for me. But this album, obviously we haven't seen Heaven Forbid yet. So I actually like the other one better. But to me, this is a more consistent album. I like all the songs. They all seem to fit together. And to me, this was actually more of an attempt to get back to the classic sound than Heaven Forbid. Because to me, on this one, you get a little more of the weirdness. And, you know, I feel like Heaven Forbid is almost like they had half of an Eric solo album and half of a Buck solo album and melded them together. This feels more like a band album to me. I like the mix. Buck is on fire. To me, this is actually the Buck's album because I like every Buck song on this record. I love every Buck guitar solo on this record. Danny Miranda is on fire on this record. I hadn't listened to it in a long time. I went back and the bass playing blew my mind. So that also feels to me like when they cut Heaven Forbid, Danny was brand new in the band and he kind of held back. And when they did this one, now it's a band and like Danny's going off. He gets a co-writing credit on Out of the Darkness, which I think is a great song. But there's just a little more of the keyboard textures, still not as much as the old days, which I totally agree with you on. But just a little bit of the weirdness. I thought Good to Be Hungry is such a bizarre, weird, classic Blue Oyster Cult track. Like it's got to be the weirdest song since She's as Beautiful as a Foot. So I appreciated that they went with something super weird. And then also, I totally agree with you on The Old God's Return. That was one of the most influential songs on me. I use that chord progression in multiple songs, actually. That's kind of helped me figure out like how they got that weird, cool, sinister vibe and like great lyrics. Now is the time when the apes take wing and we recognize them from that Oz thing. Like just a great, bizarre, weird, irreverent Blue Oyster Cult lyric. So yeah, to me, this is a good, solid album. I enjoyed it front to back. I was a little surprised that I ended up ranking it this high.
Nice. All right, I'm on number 9, Revolution by Night. Some of the same things that you mentioned earlier. The electronic drum sound takes this down a notch or two for me. I'm going to really go against tradition here, and I'm not a huge fan of Shooting Shark. It sounds too I don't like that slap bass in it. The drum sound kind of ruins it for me. It's so electronic drum sounding. When I hear them play it live, I like it. And again, it's sort of a Buck feature, but it just doesn't do anything for me on the record. And this album contains my least favorite B.O.C. song.
Can I guess?
Take a guess.
Let Go.
Yes, that is, I cringe every time I hear that. And again, it's another, like, here's this intelligent band and it's so stupid. It's so kiddie. It's just so dumb, and not even in a dumb, fun way where it just absolutely doesn't work for me. I hate it. I cringe every time I hear it. I skip over it.
I actually like it.
Really?
I like it. And I love it. My favorite part of the whole song is right before the guitar solo. Eric Bloom goes, "Give me Dharma, Donald." But that totally, for me, it is dumb. But I disagree, because to me, it's fun dumb.
Yeah, it just you know what kills it for me is the whole B.O.C. the chanting vocal thing. Just doesn't do it for me.
It's no Iron Maiden. They definitely didn't kill it with their their self-titled song.
But I do love "Take Me Away." I think that's a great Eric song. I love when Eric is singing these sort of UFO conspiracy theory style lyric. To me, that's his wheelhouse.
Yes.
That's B.O.C.'s wheelhouse, and I love him on that. He sounds great. Eyes on Fire has a great chorus. I love Veins. It's got a cool keyboard lick in the intro. Shadow of California is another one. I love that. You mentioned that one. I love the chorus on that. Sounds like classic B.O.C. with that sort of mysterious riffing and stuff like that. Feel the Thunder is cool, and I love Light Years of Love. Joe Bouchard on the vocals. It's got a great chorus. It just throws me back again to like the classic B.O.C. sound, where they would have these other songwriters on there and these different songs. And I'm a fan of big hooks and big catchy melodies, and that song is just grabs me. It's just got a great
I think it's a great song, a great underrated song too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that was my number 9. My number 9 was Revolution by Night.
Here's my number 9. I already kind of regret this. I almost switched it out, but I think Mirrors might just be here because it's the classic 5. So I think this is great performances from the band from beginning to end. Like, to me, this is right in there in the peak of the band playing wise. And the biggest pro on this album to me is it's got the Vigil, which is great. Another Alien track.
Yeah.
Great epic. One of the few Buck epics. It's like a long, complicated epic with Buck on the vocals. There's just a great fan favorite. I also really enjoy I lean towards Eric also. I love Dr. Music. I think that's a great track. I Am the Storm and Sun Jester. But I can't rate it any higher, because to me there's a lot of weak kind of poppy songs on here. They got Tom Mormon in on the production, and we're really like trying to repeat the Don't Fear the Reaper success, I think. And they're like, oh, we better not get too weird or too heavy. So this is the least heavy Blue Oyster Cult album. Even the stuff that should have been heavy, like I'm the Storm, it doesn't like hit very hard to me. Like the guitars aren't that crunchy, and it's just not mixed heavy, so to me, and also lyrically, there's a lot of poppy stuff on here. Like, I enjoy most of the songs to some degree, but lyrically, like Moon Crazy and You're Not the One I Was Looking For. They're just not the classic B.O.C. lyrics to me. And In Thee never really did much for me either. Like, I feel like In Thee is a fan favorite, and it's a good song, but to me, it's not really a Blue Oyster Cult song.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my number 8 is the same as your number 9, Mirrors. I couldn't find my copy of it, so I don't have it to show here, but similar feelings to you. There you go. It's poppier side of B.O.C., if you will, although I'm a sucker for kind of poppy and big hooks. So like, I love the song Mirrors. I think that's just a great catchy melodic rock song. It's got a clever sort of lyric. Mirrors are a negative space with a frame, you know. The
Yeah.
lyrics are sort of clever, yet it's still super catchy, and pretty girls can, you know, it's just, I love it. The background vocals and
I
everything.
do think that's a good song. Yeah, it's underrated.
Yeah, it's amazing that something like that didn't get more radio airplay. I Can't Stand You're Not the One. It shouldn't have been on the album. The story behind that, of course, if for people who don't know, Albert wrote it sort of as a goof to sound like the Cars, and the producer, for some crazy reason, threw it on the record. It should not have been on the record. I like indie. I agree with you. The Vigil is one of my top 10 B.O.C songs. UFO territory again. I love it. I love the in a purple vision, the stacked vocals.
Oh, the vocals are awesome.
Yeah, that's just fantastic. I love that.
It's a good testament to what, not that the Vigil is a great song, but this album to me has a bunch of songs that are so, but the band is just on fire in this era. So they make the stuff that I don't even like the material that much. They just make it sound great.
Yeah, the chemistry amongst the guys for sure. Great Sun Gesture, I like that. Dr. Music is a cool show opener. I know that they used it as a show opener for a while. And I Am the Storms got a great chorus to it. So yeah, it's the poppier side of B.O.C, but I like that. And like you said, I think that there's just a lot of chemistry amongst the band, and there's some misfires on this a little bit. It could have maybe been produced a little bit differently. It sounded like they were trying too hard to have a radio friendly album, but it's still cool for me. So
yeah,
that's my number 8.
All right, my number 8 is Heaven Forbid. I love this album. And I fully admit I might be biased because it did come out when I was like 17, 18 years old. I knew it was coming. I really anticipated it. I had seen Blue Oyster Cult live the year before on the Summer Days tour. It was like B.O.C, Steppenwolf, and Foghat. And Steppenwolf and Foghat were both really past it. And so Blue Oyster Cult came out and just destroyed them. You know, everybody thought they were going to see 3 old fogey bands. And you know, Blue Oyster Cult, having never stopped playing, just came out and destroyed. So that really got me into the band. But to me, this album, first of all, is probably the heaviest B.O.C album. And it just smacks you right in the face with See You in Black. That intro, that super heavy 6/8 vibe, bluesy, and then go right into that chugging, which I don't know if you ever even heard Blue Oyster Cult do that kind of heavy chugging before. On See You in Black. Great lyric that I'll never forget about, and I love the way John Shirley's lyrics, they slow you, bring you into what's going on with Eve's getting beaten up by her boyfriend, and Eric's going to help her kill him, and they're going to run away to Greece and sip ouzo. So I love that song. I love the playing on it. Super high powered. You got to give some credit to Bobby Rondinelli on this album, I think, for creating probably the heaviest version of B.O.C. But that said, I agree with you that it doesn't really sound like classic B.O.C, and the keyboard textures are missing. But in general, I think the songs are actually really strong right up until the end. I think for me, Harvest Moon is like a top 5 Buck song. And seeing it live is incredible. I love the trading solos. It goes Buck, Alan, Buck. Absolutely love that. And the little like weird chromatic licks they use to transition between the parts of the solos. Werewolf Story, so it's got that cool occult, Blue Oyster Cult thing going on. And I agree with you. Power Underneath Despair is a really, really great story. I love another Eric Prison song, and powerful Eric vocal. So yeah, I love that one. But to me, like, X-Ray Eyes is cool. That's a good, weird Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah, that's a fun
lyric.
one. Yeah, that's
a good Buck
one.
song. Hammer Back, maybe Hammer Back is the heaviest Blue Oyster Cult song ever. Cool Eric vocal to me. It does kind of taper off towards the end. Cold Gray Light of Dawn never hit me as hard as the other Eric songs on there. And I think Live For Me is a really good song, but by the time it came out, it sounded really dated, like an 80s song to me. And then the end of the album, Still Burning, is not, to me, that's not really even like a Blue Oyster Cult song. I guess that was written by John Rogers, who was only in the band for a short amount of time. But to me, overall, it's a strong album. I like most of the songs.
I will agree with you that it is probably their heaviest sounding, in the sense that the guitars are real, you know, the drums and the guitar is real aggressive sounding at times, like See You in Black and that stuff. So
yeah, doesn't sound like classic Blue Oyster Cult though. It's definitely a different animal. And also, this cover was a mistake in my opinion. Also, like, they theoretically want people to buy it, right? Are they not aware that they're famous for Don't Fear the Reaper and it's not a death metal? They're not a death metal band.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right. My number 7 is Cultosaurus erectus. All right. We're now at the point where these are I love everything pretty much.
Everything's awesome.
Yeah, everything is totally awesome from here on out. It's very well produced. Martin Birch in at this point. It's got a heavy sound, but not. I guess it's the Martin Birch influence. Just the way it's produced. It's really full. It's really big sounding. It sags a little bit in the middle of the album for me. Starts off really strong, ends really strong. So that's why it didn't rank a little bit higher for me. I love Black Blade. Blue Oyster Cult doing what they do best, sci-fi type lyric things. Monsters, I love. Fallen Angel, another Joe vocal song, which I really like. He always seems to have these where he's like right at the top of his range when he's singing, and I think it's great. Lips in the Hill is great. Unknown Tongue. I like Divine Wind. I don't like Hungry Boys. It sounds like they're, I don't know, like a new wave, like they're trying to do like a new wave thing, or I don't know. Deadline and the Marshall Plan, I like them, but they're just not quite on the level of Black Blade or Monsters for me. So that's kind of why the album didn't quite get a little bit higher. I like, as a metalhead, I like the heavier feel to this record. It just sags just a little bit for me with a couple songs that they were a couple more really, really good songs like Black Blade or Monsters, and this could have been a top 3 or top 5 album for me. So Cultosaurus erectus, my number 7.
All right, my number 7 is Tyranny and Mutation, and I'm kind of in the same territory now. Now there's nothing left but albums by the Classic Five, and you know, this is, I know a lot of fans pick this as their number 1 favorite, which I totally get. So to me, this is super consistent from beginning to end. There's no bad tracks. I love the cover. You know, it's the continuation of the first album cover.
Yeah. The black and white era stuff. Yeah.
Tons of strong songs, and tons of live staples on here. I think I've seen them play 6 out of 8 songs. And it's a good, like, 70s roomy, like, live sounding production, which it's still punchy, but it sounds very real. It could have been, I don't know if it might have been all 5 of them in a room doing it live. But to me, it sounds great. My only cons with this album are that even though it's all good songs, to me, it just lacks the 1 or 2 that would have put it over the top. You know, there's no Astronomy or Nosferatu or even a Godzilla. So I think there's, you know, for me, the closest thing on this album would be Quicklime Girl. Mistress of the Salmon Salts is probably my favorite song on the record, even though it's not the most immediate, but to me, it's the most epic. But yeah, the whole album's good. It's almost a toss-up at this point.
Yeah. All right, my number 6, I'm going to echo you here, Tyranny and Mutation. And like you said, from here on out, these albums are all great. My least favorite of the black and white era, that still, though, I think it's a great album. I think, like you mentioned, every song on here is great. Personal favorite song on here is Wings Wetted Down. I just love that song, and I don't know why some heavy metal band hasn't covered that. Another Joe Bouchard thing. Red in the Black. I kind of don't care for OD'd on Life Itself. That one for me is a little bit too stock or something. boogie
Yeah.
rock, or I'm not, Hot Rails to Hell is a great rocker. I love Seven Screaming Disbusters, especially when they play that live. I also love Mistress of Salmon Salt. So it's a great album. It's a great album. It's just that the albums after this are maybe just a little bit better. And like you said, if it had maybe one or two more, really epics like Astronomy or Workshop of the Telescopes or something like that, it might have nudged it just a little bit higher for me.
I agree. I feel like they got the band firing on all cylinders on this one, and they were about to get the writing up another level on the next one to me. But so we're on number 6 now.
That was my number 6, right? So we are on number 6.
All right, my number 6 is Agents of Fortune. I know a lot of people's favorites. So to me, one of the things I love about this album is that, to me, this is the beginning of incorporating the synths a little more heavily, especially on like Tenderloin is like one of my underrated favorites on this record. I just think it has such a cool vibe between the bass guitar and the synthesizers. And it's super varied. Like, you get some bangers with like Tattoo Vampire and This Ain't the Summer of Love, but then they're also stretching out. Don't Fear the Reaper is not like anything else they'd done before. Even Alan throws in there with True Confessions. But to me, the meat and potatoes of this album is in the middle. Like ETI is an all-time B.O.C. classic for me. I love both of the Albert tracks. I mean, those are unique at this point. Albert throwing in with this kind of weird vampire ballads, like dark, like Javira Gemini has such a cool, unique vibe. So I really like this, but I couldn't rate it higher. To me, it's a little inconsistent. Putting True Confessions at song number 2, like, totally drags the album down to me. I hear that as like a perfectly valid mid-70s rock song by a normal band, but doesn't belong on an album with a cover like this.
Yeah.
And then ending the album with Debbie Denise was like a total letdown at the end of the album. I think if they had ended on Tenderloin, that would have been a nice creepy vibe to end a Blue Oyster Cult album on. And then some of the faster, even like This Ain't the Summer of Love, I got used to the cult classic version of that, and in my head it's faster than it is, but when I play it on the album, it just feels very subdued. Like they could have done it a couple of clicks faster or something, maybe. But yeah, for me, the underrated tracks on this album though are Tenderloin, which is a great Eric vocal, and was just a track that I never hear people mention, but to me it's super cool and unique.
For sure. Well, I'm going to have some thoughts on that album later, but for now, we am going to number 5 with the first Blue Oyster Cult album. Great album from top to bottom. Some of my favorites on this: Screams, She's as Beautiful as a Foot, right? Cities on Flame with Rock and Roll, of course, B.O.C. classic. I love Workshop of the Telescopes. Last Days of May is a great lyric, great Buck lead, just a great kind of storytelling type song. Stairway to the Stars is a great rocker. And I even like Redeemed. Again, I'm a fan of Albert, and I just like these sort of, it's a little bit of a strange way to end the album. Maybe it harkens back a little bit to the Stock Forest era.
I was going to say, it sounds like it could have fit on that Stock Forest record.
So it's a little bit of that influence, but it's fun. So top to bottom, just a great album that they've played, probably most of these songs live, and a lot of these songs have been staples in their live set for a while.
Yeah.
So.
Well, now they've got, I think next month they're putting out a live album of the whole album. They did the full thing. So there will be, which I'm looking forward to hearing Richie Castellano sing some of those songs.
Yeah. All right. So number 5.
Bam, we got one the same finally. I love this record, man. I have probably stared at this album cover more than any album cover ever. It's just such a cool design. It's just timeless and weird and interesting. It's the first time, we get the Kronos symbol. So great album design. And I thought when I started this that this album would have ranked lower, and I just kind of forgot how many freaking good songs are on this record. And it's very varied. Like almost seems like the album shouldn't hang together. You go from like Before the Kiss or Red Cap, and then on the same record you have Cities on Flame and Redeemed. Yeah. It's just all over the place, but for some reason it works. They're really strong songs, and I like the mix. Like it's a really dark mix, but it just has a vibe to it.
All three of those first albums, the black and white albums, all have this similar feel to me. And I think that the sound on this record, you mentioned the cover, you sort of look at that cover and the sound of the record, it just has this really kind of spacey, cold, slightly creepy. You're not exactly sure what's happening here. And throw in some of the lyrics, workshop of the telescopes and the weird stuff. It just really sets up what Blue Oyster Cult's going to be about really well.
Yeah, that totally. In fact, I never looked it up. I assume this is supposed to tie in with workshops of the telescopes because you got the circles, so it's like they're looking through the telescope.
Yeah.
Maybe. But yeah, love the record. So there's tons of fan favorites, but my underrated ones are Screams and She's as Beautiful as a Foot, which is a very cool vibe.
Right on. Okay, number 4. This is an album that I'm surprised that some people don't like this album, and I think it's because they feel it's too poppy, but I adore this album, Spectres. Okay, everybody, Godzilla, that's the heavy song on here that gets the radio airplay and everything. Great album cover too. But for me, it's this sort of melodic, catchy pop, I guess you could say popish sound, but still keeping this sort of mysterious, weird vibe to a lot of it. Golden Age of Leather is fantastic. The intro of the song with the acapella thing is that's fantastic. I love Death Valley Nights. Albert Bouchard. I love Fireworks. I think it's just a great, catchy, another Albert thing. Are You Ready to Rock? I actually like Are You Ready to Rock as a better opener than Dr. Music. I think Are You Ready to Rock is great. I love Celestial the Queen, Joe Bouchard. Going Through the Motions is great fun. I Love the Night, another Buck classic in the lines of Last Days of May. Nosferatu, just such a cool way to end the record. So it's very well produced. There's tons of ear candy going on with keyboards and vocals, and there's just big hooks on it. And I have written here a little note here. 6 out of the 10 songs were written by either Albert, Joe, or Alan. So there's a strong influence from them on this record. And again, I think that's what makes Blue Oyster Cult work so well, is these influences from all these different writers, and the way they could take a song like Going Through the Motions and make it work, or the way Death Valley Nights, it has this sort of dark feel to it, but the chorus is just so catchy, and it's just such a well-produced album. It's just, I love it. I'll tell you a story. There's a kind of a popular record store in Orlando. It's called Rock and Roll Heaven, and the guy that owns it was playing it on the stereo, and I was like, man, I love this record. And we landed up sitting there talking for like a good 20 minutes about this album, and we both agreed, like, how were there not more of these songs on the radio? They are Fireworks or Death Valley Nights or Celestial the Queen or Going Through the Motions. So many of these songs could have been big radio hits.
They were perfect for that time too. The 70s.
Yeah, and it's, in a way, it's almost like, I mean, I like Godzilla, but it's not even my favorite song on this record.
Yeah.
And to me, it almost sticks out a little bit. It's a little bit clunky or something. I mean, it sort of works, but I actually honestly like a lot of the other songs on the record better, and then somehow Godzilla was the song on this.
I just sort of accept Godzilla because it's one of the big three, and it's like the one everybody knows, and they play it every show. But yeah, now that I think about it, it's not even like, it doesn't sound that much like what I think of when I think of classic B.O.C.
Yeah, it's a little ham-fisted a little bit. It's a little stiff. I think when they do it live now, it has a little bit more of a funkier feel to it. It grooves a little bit hard. I don't know if you saw when they did that quarantined version.
The lockdown, yeah.
Yeah, the lockdown version. And I thought that was cool because it had like a real, they're all over that. And I think on the recording, it's just a little bit, I don't know, it lacks that a little bit on the recording. So I think live, it comes to life a little bit more. And it's a fun song. People like the lyrics and the whole middle section of the song. So there you go. That's my number 4. What do you got at number 4?
Number 4. All right. This was difficult. This was super difficult for me. My 2, 3, and 4 all moved around within the last couple of days. So Fire of Unknown Origin, which I fully expect a ton of people would pick as their favorite Blue Oyster Cult album. First of all, classic sleeve.
Yeah.
This is another one I stared at that really fired up my imagination. And we did a graphic novel with our last album that has a short story based on every song. So for the Blue Oyster Cult song we did, our original based on the story, we took this imagery and we kind of imagined a story around it where you get into these cultists and into their cult headquarters and stuff. So just this image fired up my imagination a lot over the years. And the back too, the seal is super cool.
Yeah.
So another Martin Birch album. It sounds great. Although if you compare this and Cultosaurus and the 2 Black Sabbath records he did around the same time, this one almost sounds a little muddy to me. It still sounds great. The keyboard textures. One of the things I love about this record is how prominent the keyboards are. But I also feel like they rob a little bit of the clarity away from it. But it creates a vibe. And one of the reasons I love this record is I think this is the best example of the synths and the keyboards in Blue Oyster Cult. It just ties the whole thing together. Another great album to listen to at night because it's just got that spacey, synthy, creepy Blue Oyster Cult vibe. And so many great songs on it. I mean, I always look for the epics when I'm looking for a good album and when I'm rating an album. And so, Veteran of the Psychic Wars, one of my favorites. Early on, it was probably my favorite Blue Oyster Cult song. Yeah. And Joan Crawford, which I probably now prefer, actually is one of my favorite Blue Oyster Cult songs of all time. The piano intro, it's one of the best things I've ever heard. So many good songs. So the only reason that this is down here really is I'm not a huge fan of Don't Turn Your Back as at the end of the record. Like, it's still creepy. I don't know. I feel like they could have ended on something stronger. There's hardly any cons about any of these albums anymore. I love this record. So the big fan favorites, Burning for You, of course, Psychic Wars, Joan Crawford. I always really was partial to Soul Survivor. I love the bass guitar on that track. And then Vengeance, I think, is a neat Joe Bouchard song. So no complaints. It's a killer album.
Yeah, we're in that territory now. All right. Well, I'm going to echo you with my number 3, Fire of Unknown Origin. Awesome album cover, awesome back cover, iconic album cover. Kind of sums up the whole B.O.C. vibe. There's the aliens, conspiracies, UFOs, that type of thing. I love the song Fire of Unknown Origin. Burning for You, maybe I've heard it too many times, but it's still a great song. I also love Veterans of the Psychic War, Soul Survivor. I like Vengeance, Joe Bouchard vocals. I guess I'm just a fan of his when he throws things in. Joan Crawford, probably my favorite on the album. And I like Don't Turn Your Back. I think it's got sort of a weird, it's got a weird feel to it, and it's got some weird little twists and stuff. And it works for me on this record. The production is
I like it too. Honestly, I was just looking for a con, so my con section wasn't blank.
Yeah, I can't really say that there's anything I don't like about this record. I like the production is great. It's again another great headphone mix with all these really nice synthesizer and guitar stuff going on, and the vocals, and it's just a great album from top to bottom. My top three here, I could have easily have flipped any of them at any point. These are all just fantastic albums for me. So, all right, what's your number three?
All right. Number three for me is Cultosaurus Erectus, the other of the two Martin Birch albums. This was a really tough one too. I knew this was going to be right there because I consider this kind of a duo between this one and Fire of Unknown Origin. To me, this album has one of the coolest sleeves as a fan, not just because of the cover, which if you can even see it, there's a tiny spaceship flying into the dinosaur's mouth. Yeah. But all the stuff on the back, all the fan service with like the Underbelly Institute and the Museum of Disbustology, like I just always thought this was one of the coolest record sleeves. So good start. And then another thing that to me, like I said before, I look for the epics. So one of the things I love about this album is that it's bookended with the first song is Black Blade and the last song is Unknown Tongue. And so those are two great Blue Oyster Cult epics, two great Eric vocals. So to me, this album, it couldn't start and end any stronger. And also Lips in the Hills. I can't say enough about that song. There's just like, I love Blue Oyster Cult, and you got to go like really dig through their catalog to find these fast burners. You know, people don't really consider them a metal band, and they're probably not. But a big part of me wants them to be a metal band. Yeah. And
that's a good way to put it. Yeah, I know what you mean.
There's an alternate universe where like Eric sings every song and every song is heavy. And like, I love that band too. But Lips in the Hills is a great song. Really showcases Eric's vocal. He's got the power and the range, and he's got that grit in there. So it's a great metal vocal. I love the guitar lick, the intro guitar lick, the pull-off lick Buck does. And so to me, that's just like it's like a next level. So it's my favorite fast Blue Oyster Cult song. And also it feels good as it's a return to classic weird B.O.Cs. Like Mirrors didn't work out. They didn't get a big hit off of it. So they're like, screw it. We're just going to be weird. So let's go be weird and make a weird record. And also I totally agree with you on Fallen Angel. I think Fallen Angel is probably Joe's best vocal ever. Sometimes he's not a real precise singer, and he kind of is warbly, or he's not trying to be a singer. But to me, on Fallen Angel, he's got power, and he's up there in his range, and his pitch is steady, and it just sounds awesome. And Divine Wind also is like such an underrated Blue Oyster Cult track to me, about Ayatollah Khomeini apparently. But just such a weird vocal. It was such a weird lyric for a blues track.
Yeah, right.
You know, I love it. If he really thinks we're the devil, let's send him to hell.
Yeah.
Great lyric. But yeah, I love it. And I do agree with you that the middle of the record is maybe not as strong as the end. So the Marshall Plan is the one that I always had a hard time with, and now I enjoy it. But when I first heard it, I thought it was a little bit cheesy.
Yeah, the story, with the spoken word thing in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, but to me now, I feel I see it through a different lens, and that kind of falls into the category of B.O.C. just being weird to me, and I enjoy it. And I think I like Hungry Boys a little more than you. I like some of the guitar interplay in there. I like the energy of the song. So for me, this was flipping and flopping back and forth with Fire of Unknown Origin, but I give this one the edge because it starts and ends with the epics, and because it has Lips in the Hills.
Right on. All right, number two for me. This is probably number one for a lot of people. But Secret Treaties, classic album. Can't say anything bad about this album. It's got a ton of songs that are some of my favorite B.O.C. songs. Career of Evil, Subhuman. Two of my favorite B.O.C. songs, Flaming Telepaths and Astronomy. I just love down, 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 and the big drum, the way these songs sort of go with each other. Harvester of Eyes is great, Dominance and Submission, ME 262. it's just a great record. And I think out of the black and white era, although they're all similar in sound and production, I think this is the best sounding of the black and blue era. There's a little bit more, my only complaint with the other ones is that it's a little bit, there's not as much separation in the instruments. It sounds almost like it's mono at times, like the stereo spread isn't very big. It's a little bit bigger on Secret Treaties, and it just sounds like there's a little bit more going on. And it just, to me, it's just a great album, you know. Subhuman, I just love the way that comes in. The bass sounds great on this. We haven't thrown any love. We've been throwing love to Joe Bouchard for his vocals. I'm going to throw some love to him for his bass playing. You know, he's a really great, underrated bass player that adds a lot of, he's not a guy that just follows along with the guitar all the time. He adds a lot of little interesting little runs, like in the Subhuman, and I don't know if I call him a bass solo, but just where he sort of goes off a little bit and will play melodies. And he's a really interesting bass player. And when you listen to what he does, he really adds to the sound of he adds something to the songs.
Yeah, totally agree.
To the sound.
Apparently he plays the keyboard intro and wrote the keyboard intro to Astronomy too.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever read Martin Popoff's book, Agents of Fortune.
I think I have it on my shelf.
Yeah, it's great, and he talks about how Joe has a background. He was going to school as a classical piano player, and then he switched over to the bass, and so he's a guy that has a vast knowledge of, just like you mentioned, Albert is a music teacher, a school teacher now. So all these guys, Albert played guitar. All these guys had songwriting chops. They could all sing to varying degrees. You know, I wouldn't want Joe to be singing as much as Eric or something, but to have one song here and there on the record, it adds variety to it. It's the same thing with Albert. I don't think he has a strong enough voice to be the only singer, but to have one or two songs from Albert here and there, it just is, it's what adds variety. And it's, to me, it's the sound of Blue Oyster Cult, all these different influences.
One of the things I love about the band is not just the music, but just some of those things that you just mentioned make this such a fun band to be a fan of.
Yeah, the personalities.
You have everybody, you can have your favorite member, you know, there's so much to follow. And even, you know, I've been a fan of this band for decades at this point, and that, you know, just to find out, you know, okay, Joe apparently was a better keyboard player than Alan. Like, I never knew Joe played the intro to Joan Crawford.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's just so much talent in the band, and so much, you know, interesting stuff going into that mix and that recipe that makes the band.
Right on. All right. So what do you got for number 2?
Number 2 for me is Spectres. I am with you. I absolutely love this album. To me, what makes this so high on the list is that, for me, this is the best example of the mixture of everybody's input, because there's a ton of variety on this record, but every song is great, in my opinion. If I had to pick one that I didn't like as much, it would probably be like, God, is there even any one? Like maybe Celestial the Queen? I don't know. No, I think Searching for Celine, I guess, would be my least favorite if I had to pick one. It's almost disco, but even that one I like, you know, and it just gives you a little bit of everything. Godzilla comes in and it's iconic. It's got the, I don't care what anybody says, it is a great riff.
Yeah.
It's such a cool riff. And it's even musically interesting because they're going through weird parts of the scale that shouldn't work with power chords, but it's cool. And just, Golden Age of Leather is another rare Buck Dharma song epic. And, you know, if you've seen them do the acapella vocal intro to that live, it's the coolest thing ever.
Absolutely.
And more weirdness, a biker ballad that starts with an acapella section about raising your beer. It's just like the most B.O.C. thing ever. So yeah, I love this record. Eric, Buck, Joe, Albert, they all put in strong performances. I didn't check the writing credits, so I assume it sounds like Alan wrote some good stuff on this record too, so I should give Alan some credit. It's a spooky mix too. You know, my favorite Blue Oyster Cult records are the ones that would be good to put on at night, driving around at night or in the dark with my headphones on or something. I gravitate towards that aspect of the band. And then also just the fact that it ends with Nosferatu, which is one of the best Blue Oyster Cult songs of all time. Just such a great song, and a great song to end on. So yeah, again, we're in the no complaints territory, but this is number 2 for me, Spectres.
Awesome. All right, my number 1 by process of elimination.
Yeah.
Agents of Fortune. Like I said, I could have switched around these top 3, but I love the album, every track on it. This Ain't the Summer of Love, True Confessions, even though that's kind of, you mentioned earlier, it's kind of poppy, but I like that really hooky, catchy type of thing. You hear it one time and it's just stuck in your head. Alan Lanier, a writer on that one. Don't Fear the Reaper, of course, maybe embodies a lot of what Blue Oyster Cult is all about, which is the catchiness, but it still has a dark vibe to it. That whole middle section is epic. Revenge of Vera, Gemini, Albert's. Again, I love Albert's writing. Sinful Love is great. Tattoo Vampire, an upbeat one like you mentioned earlier. I like when they do. It's just a fun upbeat one. Morning Final, Tenderloin, and I love Debbie Denise. I'm an Albert fan, and I love it. It's just so catchy, and I just love really over the top. I don't want to say sappy, but it's just so with the acoustic guitars. And if you saw the when they played this entire album and Albert comes out and I thought he sounded great on it.
His voice still sounds the same.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you how you liked Buck singing True Confessions.
Yeah, no, it sounds strange to me for some reason. I mean, it kind of works. It works because I don't think Alan is probably the weakest vocalist out of all the guys. So
yeah,
it works. Yeah, I like the way
it's
Buck
weird.
sings
It's
it.
always weird hearing somebody else sing a classic track like that. To me, when I heard it, I instantly preferred it. It might be because I associate the other voices with Blue Oyster Cult.
Yeah.
I think that's the only Alan lead vocal in the whole catalog, right?
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so to me, that track, it just doesn't sound like Blue Oyster Cult to me, but not a bad track by any means.
No, I mean, the whole album, and it's got the album cover that's just the classic, such a classic album cover, and guys on the inside. It's just got everything, the sci-fi, the spacey, the sort of weird magic, and what's going on here. He's pointing at the symbol. What is, it's just thinking. It gets you thinking and everything, which is, I think, what's great about Blue Oyster Cult. They're sort of the thinking man's hard rock metal band. So there's my number 1.
All right. Well, you got mine then also by process of elimination, but. So Secret Treaties is not only my favorite Blue Oyster Cult album, but this is actually my favorite album of all time by any band ever. This is my Desert Island album right here. It's everything that's cool about the whole black and white era. It maintains the weird, creepy vibe, maintains that kind of raw live band sound in the studio. But to me, the songwriting and performances on this record are just on another level. Every single song is good. The only one I could even identify as underrated would be KG Cretans.
Yeah.
Only because it's not mentioned as much as the others, and maybe the only one that they've never played live or that they don't play live. I'm pretty sure I've seen every other track on the record play live. But to me, this album it's just totally consistent from beginning to end. It's not as varied as your number 1, Agents of Fortune, is. To me, that album's all over the place, and it works, and it's cool because it's all over the place. But to me, this is the opposite. Even the ones with different singers, they hang together because the production kind of holds it together.
And that's something I didn't mention. That I think the reason why Agents of Fortune gets in my number 1 spot is I like the production. I like sort of more headphone listening production thing, and Agents of Fortune is just got a little bit, it's got more of that than Secret Treaties does.
Yeah, I like both approaches. I love both eras, and that's definitely the split. John Gallagher from Raven told me he saw Blue Oyster Cult on this tour,
Wow.
and it blew his mind. It was like the greatest thing he'd ever seen. And then he went back and he saw him on the next tour on Agents of Fortune and thought it was bullshit. Which
There are
I
some
don't.
people that only like the black and white era. They don't like when they got more produced, for some people, the black and white era is where it begins and ends for them, which is
Yeah, I think
strange
if
to
it's
me, but
no, I can see that if you're really into the aesthetic of it and the aesthetic of rock and stuff, but there's just too many great songs you'd have to write off. And to me, if it's good material, then I don't care what style it is really.
yeah.
But the other thing, besides being totally consistent, because I said the same thing about Tyranny and Mutation, right? Which Tyranny and Mutation is totally consistent, but this is the strength of the average songs on the record, I think, is in general is higher, but then also not only my favorite album ever, but to me, Flaming Telepaths and Into Astronomy,
Yeah.
the best 1-2 punch
Yeah.
of it ever in recorded music in the history of
Absolutely.
records.
Right. I just immediately think of those two songs together.
Yeah, the way they segue together,
Yeah.
the music box.
Yeah.
And
I forgot about that. Yeah, I love that. This is great.
Yeah, it just I love everything about it. And I don't know what else to say about it. This is the one for me.
Right on. All right. Well, that does it for us. Our ranking of the B.O.C. discography. So let us know what you think in the comments. What are some of your favorite Blue Oyster Cult albums? How would you have ranked the albums? Let us know what you think. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And I would like to thank Josh for coming out and helping me with this. It was great.
This was a ton of fun. Thank you for having me. And I guess we'll have to update this in a few months when The Symbol Remains comes out.
Yeah, right. And I think maybe we'll do like our 10 favorite Blue Oyster Cult songs or something. We'll find something else to do on Blue Oyster Cult. So make sure you check out Josh's band, A Sound of Thunder, down in the description there. I'll leave a link. And until we see you next time, remember to stay heavy, stay metal. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.